I walked around the front of the building where there was a payphone attached. What I hadn't realized was that a storm cloud had blown up over the lake, and so we're right next to the lake. So I walk over and I'm gonna call my mom, and I put in the code in the phone and I'm trying to get her on the payphone, and I heard a huge crack. And this big flash of light came out of the phone and hit me right in the face and just threw me back like a rag doll. I fully expected that when you died, something would happen to tell you, bells, whistles, who knows what. But there wasn't. It was just a very natural progression of I was in this state this second, and the next second I was someplace else. I went from being in a physical form to being in a spiritual form. Kinds of great things. So I decided to go to graduate school, and I spent the next 5 years getting my doctorate in physiology with a minor in biophysics. When I finished my graduate degree, there were no jobs. And what had happened was there were a lot of people that had gone to graduate school to get out of the war, the Vietnam War. Because of the war ending, when I graduated, there was a glut of PhDs who just came onto the market. And as a result of that, there were no real good jobs. And so I thought, you know what, I need to make another decision. And I thought, I'm going to go to medical school. At the end of it, I was trying to decide what kind of a physician I wanted to be. And I settled on orthopedics because I always was one of those kids that loved taking things apart, putting them back together and rebuilding things. And I think because of my Italian heritage, I had some carpentry genes that were buried in there someplace. And so that's what I settled on. In 1994, my wife had 5 people with birthdays in the month of August. So every year we would have a communal birthday party. And they had picked a place called Sleepy Hollow Lake. At the lake, there were pavilions that you could rent. And she rented one that would hold 25 plus people. And that was going to be our August get-together. I was given the job of running the barbecue. So I was outside getting the food ready, and most everybody else was upstairs in the pavilion. And at the beginning of the day, it was beautiful outside. The sun was shining, it was a pleasant temperature, and everything seemed good. At some point, I had decided I should call my mom to check on her because she was not going to be there. By this time, my dad had already passed, so my mom was there by herself. And I wanted to check on her, so I got somebody to cover the barbecue, and I walked around the front of the building where there was a payphone attached. What I hadn't realized was that a storm cloud had blown up over the lake, and so we're right next to the lake. So I walk over and I'm gonna call my mom, and I put in the code in the phone and I'm trying to get her on the payphone, and I let it ring 5, 6, 7 times, and she didn't pick up. So I thought, all right, she's busy. I'll try her again later. And as I started to take the phone away from my face to hang it up, I heard a huge crack. And this big flash of light came out of the phone and hit me right in the face and just threw me back like a rag doll. And as it threw me back, I had the strangest sensation of moving forward. And I remember standing there going, this doesn't make any sense. I know I saw the lightning. I knew I'd been hit, and I knew I'd been thrown backwards. But now I'm standing here and nothing's making sense. And I look at the phone, and the phone's dangling. And I'm just standing there, just absolutely bewildered. And at that point, I hear my mother-in-law screaming, and she's at the top of the stairs. I'm at the bottom of the stairs. And she starts running down the stairs, headed right at me. And I thought, this can't be good when your mother-in-law's running at you, screaming. Something's bad. As she got down in front of me, she was looking off to her left. And I thought, this is really strange. And it's like I wasn't even there. And I'm like, what the hell? And I turned to go where she's going, and I took about 3 steps, and I run into myself on the ground. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm dead. And it was such a shock. I fully expected that when you died, there would be some sort of anything. Something would happen to tell you. Bells, whistles, who knows what. But there would be some sort of a signal that, hey, buddy, you're dead. But there wasn't. It was just a very natural progression of I was in this state this second, and the next second I was someplace else. I went from being in a physical form to being in a spiritual form. There was a lady who was waiting to use the phone. She gets down to start doing CPR. Turns out she's a nurse. And I'm standing there and I'm trying to call out to anybody who will listen. And I don't see, I can see all of them, I can hear all of them, but nobody can see or hear me. And then it occurred to me that I'm standing here and I'm thinking exactly the way I normally would. I have complete control of my mind, and I'm thinking in the vernacular in the way that I normally would think, and I'm having these massive racing thoughts are going through my head trying to make sense of this whole thing. But I realized at that moment that whoever I am, I always am. And there's no such thing as death. And, my spirit or whoever I was is eternal. And that was probably the first big thing realization that came to me as this whole thing unfolded, was that my spirit is here forever. So we're essentially two people. We're in this body, which is nothing more than a costume over the top of who we are always, and in our spirit form. And when I went up to the body and I looked at it, and it seemed to be very dispassionate about it. It was like, that's me, but it's not. I'm me. I'm still who I always was, and that's nothing but an empty shell. And that was pretty earth-shaking. It was not a frightening experience. It was just very matter-of-factly, this is the way things really are. And then I thought, well, there's no point in standing here because nobody can see me or hear me. And I turned around and I start to walk toward the stairs, and I'm going to go up the stairs and check on my family. And I started up the stairs, and I got to about the 3rd step, and I'm looking down at the ground, and I start to see my legs dissolve. And I thought, well, okay, this is getting really weird. And as I got to the top of the stairs, I had lost all form. I was just a ball of energy. The stairs, when you get to the top of the 1st level, it goes up another few steps to the left. And I didn't bother with that. I had no form. I just went through the wall. And when I came out on the other side of the wall, I came out right over the top of my wife, who was sitting painting children's faces. And I remember taking a picture in my head of who was there, what kids were there, how the furniture was arranged, and what order the kids were standing in. And that became an important issue later on when we were comparing notes, and I was able to say all of these things that verified the fact that, yeah, I did see it, and I was there. I continued going through that room, and when I got out of the room and went through the roof, in my whole life. At that point, I realized that I was going someplace. And I started to see a collage of high points and low points in my life. It was just, there wasn't a lot of explanation or thought. It was just, there's pictures of different things in my life. High points, low points, trauma, whatever it was. And at that point, I was just kind of settling into flowing in the stream. I didn't know where it was going or where it was taking me, but it was exciting. And it was an ecstasy. It was such a wonderful feeling. And then all of a sudden, it's like somebody flipped a switch. Suddenly I was in pain. And I was back in my body, calling out loud in my head to whoever would listen that, please don't make me do this. I don't want to go back. And I had 3 kids and a wife, and I loved my life. But there was no comparison to what I was experiencing outside my body. I was like, please don't make me do this. I was really angry. I wanted to stay where I was, because I went from absolute bliss to absolute pain. I mean, where this thing hit me in the face and where it came out my foot with like 2 hot pokers. But I realized that, it's not my choice. And so the lady who was doing CPR had stopped, and she was kneeling next to me. And it took several minutes before I was conscious to be able to open my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, everything was really out of focus. And I wanted to say something to thank her, and unfortunately what came out was, I'm a doctor, it's okay. Like, what a stupid thing to say. And so I realized at that point that, okay, you're not thinking very clearly, just shut up and just wait this out. Of course, everybody starts running over, and they call an ambulance and they call the police. And I thought, I don't want to go sit in the emergency room for 4 to 6 hours to have somebody tell me I'm alive. So I opted to just have them take me home, and I called my cardiologist friends and my neurologist friends, and I said, this happened, and they said, well, come right over, and went to their offices, and everybody said the same thing. It's like, well, you're lucky you're alive. After my near-death experience, I was afraid to say anything to anybody. This was, in the early 90s. And at that time, somebody could call the state and say, this guy's kind of loose around the edges. You might want to pull his license because he's saying things that don't make a lot of sense. I kept my mouth shut for the most part. I talked to friends and family about it, but I wasn't going to embarrass myself and have people call me a lunatic either. Before the lightning, I was on a road for academic orthopedics. I wanted to publish papers, and I was a chairman of a big spine meeting every year, and I was going down that road, and none of those things seemed to be important anymore. I was really kind of lost. I was beginning to wonder, why did I go through this? Because it wasn't making a whole lot of sense to me. And then all of a sudden, I started to have this insatiable desire to hear classical piano music, that was a big departure for me. I was a kid of the 60s. There was rock and roll. There really wasn't much of anything else. And now all of a sudden I'm having this desire to hear the classical piano stuff. And it was such a strong feeling that I drove to Albany because it was the closest place that would have classical piano CDs. I remember when I went in there, this CD of Vladimir Ashkenazy playing his favorite Chopin just jumped off the shelf into my hands. And I thought, okay, this obviously is something I'm supposed to have. And so I bought the CD and I started listening to it, and I was absolutely captivated. I could not stop listening. And I listened to it all day long. And then very shortly after that, I realized that it was not going to be enough to be able to listen to this music. I needed to learn how to play it. And that was a big problem since I didn't have a piano and I didn't know how to play. So, I was like, okay, well, now what do I do? Well, the very next day, one of our babysitters came by and said, I'm moving, and I had this old upright piano that I want to keep, but could I store it at your house for a year? And I thought, okay, this is kind of weird. I have this thought yesterday that I need a piano, and suddenly a piano's here. So I started to try to teach myself how to play, and a couple of weeks into it, I have a dream. And in this dream, I'm walking out onto a stage. And on the stage, I see myself, and I'm playing in a concert hall, and I'm playing music on a piano. And as I'm walking toward myself, I come to the realization that this is not somebody else's music. This is mine. The music had a loud ending, and it woke me up out of a sound sleep. And I remember sitting up on the edge of the bed, and I looked at the time. It was 3:15 in the morning. And I thought, well, let me go out to this piano. And I started trying to plunk out different notes of things that I heard. But I had no idea how to write music, and I had no idea how to play it either. So I said, to hell with this, and I went back to bed. But from that moment on, whenever I went to the piano, the music from the dream would start to play. And it would play all the time. And if I ignored it, it would start to play when I didn't want it to. I was trying to concentrate on surgery. I was trying to do something else. It was that powerful inside of me that, it was like, okay, this is much more than I understand that it is. And the next day I went out and I had to find a program to teach how to write music. And there was a program called Sibelius which is essentially writing music for dummies. And I was able to take that program and would start to write the music from the dream. And I spent the next 7 months, every single free minute I had. And I really went off the deep end with the music. I literally got up at 4:30 and I would practice till 6:30 when I had to go to work. And then I would do my 12 or 14 hours. And when I came home, it was time to put kids to bed. And then as soon as they were in bed, I was back at the piano, and I was there till 12, 1 o'clock. I was absolutely possessed by the music and the piano, and nothing else was important. One thing that I have found with the music is that it takes me about as close to that feeling, that euphoria of being on the other side, as I can get. It's almost like there's a connection that I can access. It's a frequency that I'm able to tune into. And, in reading about other composers, the great composers all said the same thing. Mozart was most prolific about it. And he said, the music would come to me in finished form, and all I did was write it down. And, lots of people have speculated that our brain is nothing more than a receiver. There's no way in the world it could house all the information that we have access to. There's some off-site place that we are able to communicate with. To grow spiritually and ultimately find your way home. Rejoin with the source from whence everything came.